Well, they said my neighbor, so I sent it to you.
No,
So I called the Georgia Water number last
How do you
night. They said
adjust
they're not ready for it to take subscriptions yet.
Then on them.
Yeah.
Run it.
That's probably what they meant.
I mean, you're working.
no, you're good.
Thank you. Yeah, much better.
All right, we are called together at this time at 12 o'clock to have a public meeting regarding zoning and, Russell, where do we start? Do we just?
I
we just?
think we rehashed a lot of the issues during our work session, so if it pleases the council, I would turn it directly over to
Yeah.
public comment. Yes, ma'am.
Are we holding a public hearing?
This is
Yes.
public
Yeah,
hearing.
this is-
Yes.
So we have to open and go into a public hearing?
Motion and vote to enter into it.
Okay, very good, thank you. All right, so, do we have a motion to go into a public
Sure.
hearing? We have a
Second.
motion and a second. Can we call for the vote?
Councilmember Grayhouse?
Aye.
Councilmember Tucker?
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves?
Yes.
Councilmember Hood?
Yes. Okay, we did have a work session earlier this morning. And Oasis, so that we're on record, can you again remind us of hearings we have in the future? So if there are people that couldn't be here and may want to come to something in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're having this public hearing. The next one's going to be February the 25th at 10 a.m. And then once we have a final proposed draft of the zoning and sign ordinance, we're going to schedule another one for March 22nd.
March 22nd?
What time?
I want to
Yeah.
say
What's the target
that
date for
was
signing?
at 12. April 5th. So the first meeting in April should be that's our target officially, adopting this date.
And I said in the earlier meeting this morning, and that these things haven't changed since the 60s, and the world is a different world today. And our citizens have certain expectations. When they live in a certain area, they want it to look and be, Russell mentioned the word today, I think, consistent. And we want to have some consistency with how we do it. But I will say, we definitely want to hear from the public, and, if we missed something here, have we missed something there? But what we want to try to do is bring our world up to date out of the 60s and into the 2022. And if we've missed something, let us know. That's why we have these meetings. But we want to be consistent, we want to be prudent, and we want to make sure that we've taken into account what we need to. So when we did this, and it doesn't mean that I fully expect that we had comments this morning that some people say, well, we didn't even know about this. Well, we've been working on this for a year, more than a year probably. And notices go in the paper as far as the legal section when we begin to do those things. And I would just say, that doesn't surprise me so much, because while some of us come to all these meetings and keep up with everything that's going on there are a lot of people that don't, and then they get upset in the end. So I would tell people to really pay attention, go to whatever news sources you have, the city website, the newspaper, the radio, and be aware, because this process has been going on a year. Though I will predict, though, 6, 9, 10, 12 months from now, there'll come up an issue that was something that maybe we hadn't considered, and maybe we just didn't think, and it'll pop up, and we'll deal with it at that time. And it doesn't mean that you can't make amendments or things like that. So what we're trying to do is get it as best we can, and do the best job we can, and work for our citizens' best interest. But there are issues that come up that maybe hadn't been thought about, and I know we have some people here today that may want to talk. And, I'll open the floor. Charlie, I think, did you have something that you wanted to say?
I'm assuming mine, I don't know how long yours is. Do you have something to say? No?
I'm in
You're listening?
comment.
I've got a question first. I know most of y'all, and I've met them.
And let me say that the rules we have here is that you have this is unusual from the other comment section, not less than 10 minutes that we can allow. You don't have to go that long, but we've got to give you at least that. And Charlie, if you'll come up on that
There's 2 X's on the
X
board,
spot,
and then
give
there's a
us your
sign
name
issue.
and, give us your name and address again, and then just tell us what you'd like for us to hear.
And I was asking who this gentleman is. I know everybody else, and I've met them.
These are zoning mechanics consultants.
Okay.
He's the one helping draft all of this.
Okay. Today's the 22nd.
Yes.
Hand sanitizer. Excuse me.
Bill Johnson. Bill, I was trying to remember when this whole process started, but we think it's more than a year ago.
Definitely more than.
Yeah, a lot of work, but Charlie, tell us what you'd like for us to do.
Say that again?
I said, you have the floor.
Okay, great. If I could, I'd like to hand out some things to y'all, if that's all right. Can you pass them on down, Mr. Long? I printed enough for the absent members as well. So since the people are absent, I don't know if Bill wants one or
Yeah, I'll grab one.
the deputy clerk wants one, but there should be a couple, 3 extras, so I give us two extras. All right, I introduced myself last time. Y'all know my background, my experience with, I've worked with the government, so I've edited a lot of government documents in my time. I know I don't seem that smart, but I have edited a lot.
You could just restate that.
Yeah, just.
I'm 130 Smoky Hollow Drive, Thomaston, Georgia, Charlie Day. And home to Ace Cleaners at 301 West Main Street. Start with, I have many concerns about the proposed ordinance. I have a lot of concerns about the old ordinance. I'm not a big fan of the government at any level, federal, state, or local, restricting my freedom or anybody else's freedom. And I'm not a big fan of asking the government to restrict freedom of others. I don't tell my wife what color lipstick to wear. That's just the kind of person I am. But in an effort to reduce the amount of time, I'm going to stick with the Ace Cleaners portion of my concerns. I will say, in one typo I think y'all need to fix is in the proposed, on the list of properties that you show the changes in, that document on your website, I found a piece of property that actually belongs to the county, so I don't think y'all can change the zoning on it.
Is it the one out on?
Goshen Road.
Yeah, I found another one too.
Yeah.
I'm
So
clear.
Mr. Mallory's 150 acres, I think belongs to the county. Anyway, I'll start out with C1 commercial concerns, or the zoning of that. I can't think of any business in this area that's looking for walk-up foot traffic. I think most businesses in this proposed district are trying to attract customers from outside this district. We're currently located at the, and I think we'll stay that way, located at the intersection of 2 state highways, 74 and 36. So that doesn't sound very neighborhoody to me. Building's been hit 17 times by tractor trailers, which doesn't sound very conducive to foot traffic. And the following 2 statements I got on the C1 neighborhood, this is copied from y'all's text, page 57, concerning the neighborhood district. It says, Thomaston, historic East Thomaston, and Martha Mill neighborhoods appear ideally suited to realizing the planned goals of reinvesting in declining neighborhoods and minimizing sprawl along Thomaston Street networks. If you look at your map, I don't see anything that's currently in those 2 neighborhoods, with the exception of the Martha Mills property itself, that got that designation zoning. So you're kind of contradicting yourself of what you say is ideal for it, but then you put it on another neighborhood or another area of town. The next thing is it says the location of, on page 61 of the document, the location of these establishments is expected to be off local streets and main routes, thereby reducing customer volumes and fostering walking. I don't consider 74 and 36 a local street. I think the DOT considers it a state street. Anyway, so that's what I got on C1 neighborhood. On my flashpoints concerns, the reason I asked who you were, because I joked with him on the text. I said, how old's the guy that's writing this stuff? Give you a little history on dry cleaners. It'll be boring, but since nobody else is here to talk, I guess I can talk. in the 60s and 70s, petroleum, started solvent, was common. And then they burned down some strip malls, they burned down some downtown areas, and it became persona non grata. So Dow Chemical Company invented perchlethylene, and it's a great cleaner. And it was great for a lot of years until EPA found out it causes cancer. You drop a spoonful in the ground and it goes to the center of the earth in like 2 seconds. It's destroyed many people's properties, follow-on owners of properties. Ace, by the way, Ace Cleaners has never been on it, we've never had it. We were the left-handed stepchild in the 80s. Everybody's like, you're not on PERC, you know? We were on the old stuff, which was more flammable. PERC, the good thing about PERC is it will not burn. You can't catch it on fire. It will kill you, but it won't catch on fire. So that's PERC and a little history on dry cleaning. I've spoken to, you can look at my list, I've spoken to many, I don't know if you want to call them industry experts, but my sales rep who deals with North Macon and North Georgia, and he's involved with his company, goes from all across to Texas, all the way across the southeast. So his company's in touch with thousands of cleaners. I've talked with my chemical salesman who happens to live in Barnesville, but he represents his chemical company from the southeast. He said he has over 50 cleaners in the southeast on the same chemical I'm on, which is some other companies make similar chemicals, but his has 50 that are in the strip malls and downtown areas where it's building to building to building, like our downtown area, but not like Ace Cleaners. Spoke to him. I talked to Rhonda from Master Clean, and I left people's last names out because I didn't think it would be public record unless y'all wanted it. But Master Clean in Columbus, she was a recent former president of Southeastern Fabricare Association, so she's in touch with hundreds of cleaners, and they deal with, they get involved in regulatory concerns and stuff like that, and lobbying government. And then I talked from a guy named Zach at Real Star Union. They happen to be located in McDonough, Georgia, but it's the only importer of these Italian machines, which is what I have. And they have over 50% of the market share of dry cleaning sales across the nation. So if you buy one of their machines, which is over 50% of them, in California, it's coming via McDonough, via Italy. So none of these people have ran across other people that have had these concerns about the flashpoint that y'all are having with in modern times. My insurance company / state fire inspector, it's the same guy. He works for the insurance company, but he sends a bill to the state. He's signed off to do state fire inspections. He comes by and inspect my boiler twice a year for the insurance company and for the fire inspector. And then I get a bill from the state fire inspector. They have zero interest and zero concern about my dry cleaning machines or my chemicals. My insurance company's been more concerned about my fascia and my boiler than they have about my dry cleaning machines. At one point y'all were quoting me some Class A, Class B type cleaner stuff. Class A being the non-flammable type. The only realistic Class A non-flammable chemicals out there is water, which I use, like 70% of my cleaning is done via water. And you can wet clean a lot of stuff that used to not could be wet clean, so we do some of that. And PERC. And I don't think the city wants to be endorsing perchlethylene. There has been PERC in Upson County. I'll let y'all figure that out. But not at 301 West Main, I can guarantee you that. PERC is on the major EPA naughty list, and I don't think y'all want to be endorsing the Class A cleaners just because it's low flash point, because it won't burn via perchlethylene. That, in my opinion, but y'all can do your own research on that. Modern machines, which I got the, not bragging, but it's the latest and greatest sliced bread you can get. Modern machines are much safer. The clothes you put the clothes in the machine, you close the door, you start the machine, the fluid's introduced from a tank below it, goes in, it cleans, it looks like a wash machine, looks like water, it's not water. It extracts like a wash machine, the water goes, or the fluid goes away, goes back into the tank in that machine, then it dries in that machine, you never open the door. So I put them in dirty and dry, they come out hopefully clean and dry. There's not even an exhaust on this machine, it's all self-contained. It's got sniffers on it, it's sniffing the stuff that detecting when it determines that it's dry. It's trying to reclaim as much of this high-priced chemical as it can because I want it to. And then it goes back in the tank and it's got a catch basin on it in case that tank leaks. It's got a tank underneath that to catch anything like that. It's also got 2 little nitrogen bottles sitting on top of it that if it detects some kind of problem, it's going to inject this nitrogen in there to try to prevent any fire. There are no open flames in the environment of this. My building's hot as rip year round. But all the heat's coming from one self-contained room that's surrounded by cinder block with two double metal doors on it. And there is open flame in there, a big open flame, and it's the boiler, 50 horsepower boiler, producing steam that goes to the dry cleaning machine, the dryers, and all the presses in there. So all the flame is in one room, everything else is separated. The other points I have on Ace Cleaners itself, it's a freestanding building. It's constructed of steel and brick. It's not wood constructed. The closest building to me is Truett, was Truett Mallory, Al Pasley and them. And they wouldn't be as close as they are if my dad hadn't signed off on a variance so that they could build, because prior to that it was an empty car lot for 100 years. And then my dad gave them a variance so they could build as close as they did to us. All right. And my last point on Flashpoint concerns is the code that was sent to me from y'all, that y'all were looking at originally, was from New York City. And I'm like, okay, are we playing New York City games? Are we doing this for restaurants? Are we doing this for rental houses? Are we playing the New York City game? Because I don't want to play the New York City game. And I don't think many other business owners want to play the New York City game on every code that New York City come up with, because I imagine it's quite a bit crazier than ours. I provided you some documents. The first one you can keep, or you can keep it all, but pretty boring. SDS data sheet, that's the chemical that your clothes are getting cleaned in, unless it's in water. If you notice page 5 of that shows the thing that y'all were concerned about. I can find it. About a quarter way down the page, Flashpoint 64 degrees C, 147 degrees F. So if you reference that like old Stoddard that we have used, it's a petroleum-based product. It used to be down to Flashpoint like 102. Now we're up to 147. So that's the first document I provided. The second document looks counterintuitive to my point. The title of the article is Dry Cleaners, a Miniature Chemical Plant. If you look at the date of the article, it's 1997. It's from some firefighting engineering magazine that I never heard of. But I did a Google search, it's an article I found. And I'm like, that doesn't look like it's going to help my cause any, so I read the article. Read the whole article. So this is back when people were running Stoddard Savage with flash-points of 102 degrees like we were running. They didn't write an article about the high flash, or the low flash point, the worser flash point. Chemical. They chose to write an article about the hazards of purple ethylene, which doesn't even burn. They were worried about the chemical, just them breathing the chemical while they're trying to fight a fire. So like I said, it looks counterintuitive to me. We're not using perk, guarantee it. Never been there. The last one I found on the CDC website, which is a current document, HC Hazards and Controls number 21. And if you look on the first page at the bottom, it talks about these. First off, it says the hazard is dry cleaning machines, can be fire, blah, blah, blah. If you look at the bottom third of it, it says new solvents and machines, new petroleum-based machines with solvents above 131, I'm at 147, have been developed, less likely to ignite and explode, and then it says new machines. And like I said, I don't believe you can buy any newer technology as far as safety or environmentally friendly than the two machines that I'm operating. If you're curious, they're 60-pound machines. You put 60 pounds of clothes in each machine, and they hold approximately under 200 gallons of fluid per machine. And you're consuming very little of it because it gets recycled. It cooks like a liquor still. So you get the dirt stays in the reservoir, and the solvent gets cooked out and it gets put back in the tank. So it gets cooked every time, so you're using clean solvent. So, but the consumption rate is very little, thank goodness, because it's very expensive. That's it. Y'all have any dry cleaning questions related to my business or concerns? Probably bored y'all to death.
No, I guess maybe Russell, I'd want you to come in on the issues and the things that y'all talked about, and there's still some things unresolved.
Yeah, so what I've asked Bill to do, considering all of the conversation and questions, was to have him do some research, and he came up with kind of a draft we thought would work. I sent it to Charlie this morning. Did you see any issue with that?
I was still a little kind of working on this, so I did a rough read, the first, I don't want to commit at this point, but I didn't on the first 30-second snapshot.
Here it is, do you like to look at it?
And the other thing is, I just ordered that was NFPA 32.
Right.
Ordered that today for $58. It should be here in 2 days, I hope. I paid for 2 days shipping, so hopefully it'll be here in 2 days. To get the digital copy, you had to sign up for $9.99 monthly with an annual fee, so I just figured I'd go with the hard copy.
So I'll read it for the council. It just says dry cleaning plant, and these are some of Bill's notes. May want to call them dry cleaning establishments as they are not relegated to industrial districts. So that wouldn't relegate them to an industrial district. A building used for cleaning apparel, fabrics, carpet, textiles, or articles of any sort by immersion and agitation, or by immersion only in volatile solvents, including, but not by way of limitation, petroleum, distillate solvents, or chlorinated hydrocarbon solvents and related processes. Then it says, all dry cleaner plants and pick up and drop off establishments performing dry cleaning shall comply with NFPA Section 32 standards for dry cleaning facilities of the fire code. So the NFPA ties to the fire code, which we've adopted by reference as part of the International Code Council, and they have a specific section which references dry cleaning facilities. And then the note, given the new information, such businesses may be allowed in C1, C2, and DT districts. So my understanding in layman's terms, you would permit it, reclassify what you call it, so that it's not relegated to industrial districts, and the only standard to dictate or govern the use would be the NFPA, which is the fire code standard.
Right, and that was my objective, to be able to have it in the neighborhood without fear of explosion or fire.
So as long as they meet the fire code, they
Right.
can do it.
Yeah, so they're not relegated to industrial districts, as so many zoning ordinances do. And I called the Dry Cleaning and Laundry Institute, which I didn't know there was such an institute.
DLI.
I got that from, Courtesy Cleaners in Hayesville, which I was familiar with. They had a new process, 10 years ago, and they're right in the neighborhood. So people can walk to their dry cleaner and drop off or pick up, sort of like Sig Samuel's used to be in Midtown. But I think that satisfied me. I hope it satisfied this gentleman as to the reference to this standard. If you comply with the Section 32 standard, then we should be fine.
Which Charlie would have to now anyway?
Well, it should be in the fire code, the city's fire code
That's what
ordinances.
So it wouldn't change anything.
No.
I mean, the fire department comes by once or twice a year, and I give them
And
I call it a field trip for them. They can come by, and I think they have nothing else to do, so they come by and they
Well,
look at.
I think
Look
that's
at my
part of
fire
what they
station.
do. They come to the bank,
The same.
they come to every place, hospital, every business, I'm sure.
They come walk around every once in a while. Sometimes they have a few questions, sometimes they just want to see my fire extinguisher. Normally not a big deal.
Question, off the topic question.
Yes, sir.
How many fire emergency events have you had at your dry cleaners?
Since I've been there, which is most of my life, and I'm 52, zero that I know of. I can't think of one in Dutchess County. There used to be 5 dry cleaners here at one point in time. So, I mean, I'm definitely happier, and I'm anxious to get this NFPA, is that correct? Booklet in and read it. It was locked down, you can't, they had to subscribe to the electronic format or get a hard copy, so I got it coming. I want to hopefully read it.
And my guess.
I would imagine I'm probably in compliance with 95% of it already.
Yeah.
My one concern is sprinkler systems. And I talked to a guy that owns a cleaners probably 4 times the size of mine in Atlanta, and asked him today if they had sprinkler systems. He said no. He didn't say the city or anything else. He said the insurance company looked at it, and they decided it was a bigger risk to have the sprinkler systems as far as damage to machinery, clothing, and all that kind of stuff. The risk of fire was not as great as the risk of accidental setting off.
But it seems that you've got suppression already built into the machines that,
Machines, yeah.
You know,
That was my big concern, is I just need to read that thing and see if it says you gotta have.
I don't know about the boiler, what, that, I mean, we've got a boiler,
Yeah,
but I don't know what suppression system that.
got a gas valve at the gas meter, 2-inch gas line feeding.
So we met, so.
But there is safety, there is safety stuff in that boiler. I mean, he gets it, I mean, it's, if it starts getting too high pressure, it's low water knockoff, high pressure knockoff, there's all kinds of
Right.
knockoffs on it, on the boiler, which is inspected twice annually. Once operational, and then once a year I have to shut it down, and he looks at the guts of it to see that it's not corroding and all that kind of stuff.
And I would think that 32 document might be a document, I would hope that it is something that's familiar to the fire department anyway. And I would guess Charlie's in compliance. And so we may have, Charlie, I hope we may have solved your problem.
Yeah, I feel better right now. Like I said, I want to see this book, and see how much money I got to spend. But I mean, you know. Couple questions on the first half of my concerns, though, is on the C1 neighborhood stuff. I mean, what are y'all thinking? You said put dry cleaners in C1, so I assume y'all are talking about leaving me C1. What y'all's thoughts are right now? I mean, but you see my point about y'all's ideal relationship of a C1, but yet everything that's ideal is not in C1.
Like what would be excluded? That you said.
No, well, I'm not talking about excluded. Y'all put stuff in there that you didn't reference, but what you did reference in your write-up of a description of C1 is not in there. So what Mr. Bill, I can't remember your last name, said was ideal for C1 neighborhood is not in C1 neighborhood. So I think you either need to delete that comment or change the color coding on the map and put Silvertown and East, which she's probably gonna think I'm throwing her under the bus.
Or give me an example.
Well, I
Or
did.
the
Look what I wrote. Look, the page I gave you. Look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth bullet down.
Charlie, you're saying that the examples we've tossed out are actually not.
I quoted this from y'all's document. Verbatim. I actually cut this. I didn't even retype it.
Let me just say, the comprehensive plans and zoning ordinances are to an extent aspirational. It's what we'd like to see. And that text is taken from your comprehensive plan. It's the factual basis for things like developing a C1 neighborhood commercial district. So I don't think I'd like to take that out. If there's some issue with on the ground, the zoning of it that doesn't match up, maybe there's a disconnect there that we can revisit.
So the thought with the C1 neighborhood, I thought my intention, and you're talking about the big tract.
All I'm pointing out is what y'all described as an ideal relationship for C1.
Would be neighborhood.
Y'all did not include, well, y'all referenced two specific neighborhoods, East Thompson and the Martha Mill neighborhood, which I don't, maybe you consider the Martha Mill site a neighborhood, but I consider the neighborhood around it the Martha Mill neighborhood. So the two neighborhoods you reference in your document, y'all's document, as being ideal for it, y'all did not include in it.
So we did, we rezoned that entire tract C1.
It's not the mill tract, but not the neighborhood.
Right, so the tract is commercial neighborhood. It's not in an actual neighborhood, but it's the transitional piece that draws from the
What
neighborhood.
about East Thomaston then?
There were no large tracts or creatable, all that stayed R1.
Man, I was thinking neighborhood as being like the whole neighborhood zone that way, so you could have home, beauty shop, that maybe was or was not a house. I don't care, I'm just saying it seems contradictory to me. So,
Russell, in East Thomaston is the old Thomaston Mills site. See,
We proposed it as a C1 zone. Currently, it's heavy industrial, which is certainly not conducive to residential.
okay.
was for 100 years.
Hadn't been for the last 20.
Yeah.
Okay. Charlie, any other questions?
No.
So Russell sent you, what he had built.
He sent me that paragraph that
Yeah, that was the
Bill was just
latest.
showing me there.
Okay.
And then, I know some more business owners maybe coming Friday that have neighborhood concerns, but what's allowed and not allowed. I'll let him speak for himself if he gets here, but, he had a few concerns about not what he's using for now, but what he might could see using the building for in the future. Anyway.
All right, anyone else?
Lonnie can be my proxy.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Allison Uphold, and I'm one of the members of the Park Committee for the Greatest Generation Memorial Park. And I have not read the document. I kind of wanted to wait. I know it's a long zoning, I don't know how many pages, over 200.
And Allison, will you give us your address?
My address is 124 Mill Race. My concern is just, is there protection for parks? So that they're protected, the green spaces are protected in this zoning plan.
So the question would be, who would they be protected from?
Manufacturing or businesses,
So they're governmental owned, right?
yes.
So the way it works is if we created a non-governmental use, then they would be subject to zoning, yes. If it's a governmental use, then no. So if we created governmental property as a proprietary use, meaning we bought a building downtown and we leased it out through the DDA for a bakery, or we sold something else that was a commercial property that the city owned, then it would be subject to zoning, yes.
So are you saying there, it is protected from?
Well, right now,
Unless the city wanted to do a business?
right. So right now,
So-
it would be exempt from governmental use or governmental function.
So shouldn't the city follow the same rule as a private owner? Or,
Well,
Industrial.
a private owner would not vote to rezone their property. Right, that would come before the body. So that's the whole point in the governmental function. There's governmental assets, there's roads, right? We wouldn't let you build a road through your house, or
Right.
we wouldn't let you install a sewer lift station or run a high power transmission line. You know, those are governmental functions that are traditionally
well, that's common sense.
precluded, and that's the reason. But technically, if you were by zoning, you know, I would have to have that rezoned, and then what would that rezoning be for a governmental function? That's why those are exempt outside of proprietary uses. Like if we did lease a building for a commercial use, then it would be subject to that land use. Does that make sense?
Not sort of, not really. I just want protection. I don't want the city to.
So let's say you owned 35 acres. Allison Uphold owns 35 acres, and you want to sell it to Bill Johnson's pencil shop, but it's R1. Bill Johnson would then come before the city or you, and we would have it rezoned, and then you could sell it, and he could make his pencil shop. Same thing would happen if the city sold the park. It would still have to go through a rezoning, right? Because that land use would not be consistent with the current land use, and it would have to be rezoned once it became private property.
Right.
Does that make
It
sense?
does make sense.
Yeah.
And I'm glad there are steps to do that. Okay. So right now, we can't have a protection for our parks.
Who is it protected against?
It's not protected against. it's protected for.
Yeah, but what is it, what is it protecting against? What is the basis for the protection?
Chick-fil-A,
Well, Chick-fil-A don't own it, the city owns it.
right.
If Chick-fil-A owned it, they would
The
have to have
city
it.
wanted to sell part of
If
it.
Chick-fil-A owned it, it would have to be rezoned.
I get that.
And it would follow the
And nothing
process.
would prevent Chick-fil-A from coming to the city and say, we want that piece of property. And then it would come before, it would be a rezone.
But it would still have to follow the same process that
Yeah.
a private property owner would have to follow.
Well, one of my concerns is we have a wonderful ballpark, Silvertown Ballpark. And let's say one day, someone wants to come in and tell the city, we want to build a high-rise condominium for the city,
Right.
so that the city can make money. And because the city owns that park.
That would be a proprietary function and would be subject to zoning. That's not a governmental use.
Right. Okay. So that's not, so you're telling me that can't be done?
Correct.
Well,
I'm not saying it can't be sold and rezoned.
yeah, it can be, virtually anything can be done, but it has to go through rezoning guidelines, and it has to be brought before the city council. So to want permanent protection, like,
Green space.
yeah, I don't think, in our community, I don't think that's possible because, we all look at the Greatest Generation Park and say it's awesome. I can't imagine anybody not wanting to be there forever. And we can't bind future councils and, if somebody comes in and say, we want to make, we want to make a regional headquarters for Google, and we want it on that property.
Right.
Then that's a consideration. There's a way to do that. It's not permanently protected from that, but,
The other question was, how would you permanently protect something?
I don't know.
I think I'm not, certainly don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're saying you're wanting protection, and you use the Greatest Generation Park, so I'll continue with that example. You want protection, obviously, from the city to have the ability to sell that in the future.
Correct.
That's what you're trying to, that's what you're asking.
And not just the greatest, all parks.
I just use it as
Right.
an example.
Yes.
So you're wanting a way to preclude the city from even entertaining the idea should Google come knock on our door.
Put it on the historic register.
It is.
We already are.
You can still sell it.
We're not,
Really?
we're not a local historic district. though.
So the only way you
Like
can
if it's
do
on the
it,
National Historic Register, the city can sell it?
Totally
absolutely.
different, yeah.
Really?
And as long as we don't use state or federal money, you can tear it down. Not saying, that's how it works, right? The only time historic comes in is when you're using federal or state money.
and
Or
y'all,
if I own it.
y'all, and herein we have a discussion in which you've got two opinions. You want more restriction, you want little or no restriction.
Yep.
So it just shows how,
Why don't,
So if you were to bind it, the way you could bind it, let's say we want to amend the city charter. We want to go to the General Assembly and say, we want you to change our charter that says we can no longer sell parks. And General Assembly passes it and the governor signs it. They could turn right around and send a new charter to the General Assembly and say, we want to undo that. And the governor signs it and he undoes it. So there's no way to bind it in perpetuity.
okay.
Question for the older people here, including myself. Remember the bird sanctuary on 19 where Walmart is? For 100 years, there was a little sign there that said bird sanctuary where you could pull off, and now there's Walmart there. I don't know if the city owned that or what.
I don't know.
You don't remember that?
I should. I've been here for a long time, but.
Bird sanctuary?
It's grown-up woods where Walmart was, and it had a sign there, and you could pull off, and there was like a little mini park, and it said bird sanctuary. I thought it was kind of a weird spot when I was a teenager, but now it's Walmart.
You know, I guess. Me again. Jane Burdette, 417 3rd Avenue, historic Silvertown. And of course, we've had a lot of discussions about how do we protect. When I think about, I commend you all for taking this on. This has been a tremendous undertaking, and I think you all have done a great job. And I really appreciate you listening to what we have to say, and I really do feel like I've been heard. And of course, Silvertown is on the National Register of Historic Places. The downtown area is a local historic district, and each one of them do allow for certain incentives, because our whole purpose is to bring all of this downtown and our historic areas up. And just being able to say to developers, hey, we do have, some more historic areas outside of downtown, is something that is important to me and my neighbors in Silvertown. And then when we have these C1 districts that are going to maybe come into play at some point, then we worry about, buffers, traffic, what's that going to do? We have a lot of cut through right now in all directions. And then, of course, you've got those two churches. There's no telling how long those two churches are going to be in operation. I think those are those R1s or those
Where at?
in Silvertown, those two churches?
I don't know what the churches are.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But, if those go away, then, we could have, I like the idea of these neighborhood commercial zones, as long as, we have buffers and, there's such things as light pollution and that kind of thing. As long as they're well regulated to fit into the neighborhood, and I think you all have built in a lot of that, which I appreciate. But, hopefully you'll, let developers know, hey, we have a National Register property. We're here. Please give us consideration when it comes to what you're going to put around us, because Silvertown and East Thomaston, we are being squeezed from every direction, from Hannah's Mill, from 19, from behind R Street. If the church pulls out, then we got a whole nother issue over there. So that's just want to say, please keep us in mind. We raise our hand and say, hey, we're here, and hopefully someday we may be designated a district, but that time may come when our town gets a little bit richer and more, people get more involved.
So, Russ, let me ask you, those two churches are currently regulated.
I think you can have churches in various zoning districts. Is
So
that
in
right?
R1, you can currently.
Yeah.
Right, I didn't know whether the churches themselves were R1 or whether they were designated.
I would probably guess they're R1 if I had to
I would
guess.
imagine.
So an interesting thought that I would think you probably wouldn't disagree with, but you might. Let's just say a developer came in and said, let's say those churches basically dwindled down and they were no longer used as churches. And he said, I want to come in and build an addition to your neighborhood that are houses, 1 to 4 family that look much like the other, craftsman style houses. Would you be okay with that? If he said, we're going to level this and build 40 more houses or whatever?
I think as long as that protection of, if it has to be rezoned, that probably wouldn't mean rezoning. I think as long as it's in keeping with the neighborhood, which I believe that's been built in, and, some public input.
So all change isn't necessarily good. What I've mentioned earlier is consistency is a good word.
Right.
Because, you want to try to, and as far as Charlie, multi-generational business. He wants, there's a very legitimate concern there. So, again, what we're trying to do is improve what we had. But we want to represent the people and what they think is best, and we're not going to please everybody. There's going to be people, and there are going to be issues that are going to come up 9 months to a year from now.
Right.
There's just going to be a one-off or something like that.
And what's interesting too is that what we're talking about now, as far as these little neighborhood commercial zones and walkability, we're just a mile from downtown, bike paths, walking, being able to go back and forth. And I've seen, Silvertown come back up since we've been on the National Register, because a lot of people really like to live in a historic area. And we've got a lot of young people that have moved in. And we got lots of baby strollers, and people use Greatest Generation Park all the time. It's just a great thing. But we're going back to the way it was before the Silvertown Business District got torn down. That was a perfect example of what we're talking about, recreating now. So it's funny how things, kind of come and go. But
And one thing I want, downtown is very, as protected as you can be, but
Right.
but I want to see some changes in downtown related to walkability. I just feel like you're far more protected driving a car. People say it's crazy downtown. There's wrecks here and there. The real danger is to pedestrians walking through those intersections and
Yeah.
people. Anyway, we're making our best effort. Thankful for
And I
to
thank you
people
all
like
for
Russell.
everything you're doing. I know
Mr.
you'll be
Johnson.
glad to get this over with and, one and done. Thank you very much.
If I could just, a point of information, you asked whether places of worship are permitted in the R1. They're permitted in the R1, and because of the cumulative nature of the current ordinance, they're permitted in every residential district. I thought they'd be permitted in the C1 too, but it doesn't carry over. But everything after R1 refers back to R1 in terms of permitted uses, which includes churches, fraternal organizations, and clubs not operated for profit.
So let me ask
That's
you.
under old zoning?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the new doesn't. So what if there were a C1? Let's say a C1 property that, how churches now look far different than the traditional churches many of us grew up with. What if somebody said, I want to buy that space and redo it and do it as a contemporary worship center? Would that be allowed as a use?
And one of the things you got to think of too when you do comprehensive land planning is there's certain restrictions with alcohol and liquor stores and things like that to churches. So if you want to allow those things, like we've said, we want liquor stores and we want some of these things, if you allow churches to go there, you're inadvertently restricting your commercial zones by state law based on what you allow in that zone.
I don't know, I'm Catholic, we drink at our church.
Yeah, but there's state laws of how close you can be, right?
Right, right. No, that's an interesting thought, as far as if they wanted to build a contemporary. But I do, from reading it, and, I'm just an ordinary citizen that's learning as I go. And so what I see is that you've written into the zoning that, for instance, if a house burns down, that it would be rebuilt within the same character of the neighborhood. And so I think that's what would be, hopefully, come into play if something like that were to happen. Because we are trying to maintain that character. National Register is, it's a big deal.
So
And-
Russell, let me ask you, would it have, I would hope they build craftsman style houses and it look much like what you got. But Russell, just because it's in a historic area, does it dictate that somebody would have to build,
It just says similar. There's no certificate of occupancy currently or requirement through HPC for architectural significance outside of the very vanilla standards that we put in there.
Right, we know we can't regulate that at this point in time, but for instance, if you look at the new houses on O Street, on this side of the road is in the National Register boundary. On the other side of the street are the new houses that were built maybe 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. Do you remember how long those were built? I'm thinking maybe 10 or 11 years ago.
More so
anyway.
than that.
But those houses are all built within the character of the neighborhood. The fellow who built them actually looked at the Mill Village houses. He made them bigger. I think we talked about making in the R1, making them a little bit bigger than the ones that are there now, because we're like 1,000 most of those Mill Village houses are like 1,000 square feet, and then a lot have been added on to. So I think you all were talking about 1,500 square feet, something like that.
We put a bill back provision in the, didn't we? For, yeah.
Yeah. So like R Street and the way they do that, you know, and that's nice. But of course, we just like for developers to know we're there, not to regulate anything, but to just, the buffers are the big thing because they're right up against us. I mean, they're within,
So outside of the traditional setback, how far of a buffer?
1,280 feet. Well, you know, and maybe
Right,
it's,
because it can't be arbitrary, right? So how do you peg that?
I don't know, I'm thinking of landscaping or whatever, because there are some places where there truly are no,
But there's zones, some of the zero lot line
it's almost
type
like a
probably,
zero lot line.
yeah, I
If
mean,
you-
it's,
Yeah, if you go in the alleyways,
Right.
especially on the C1 that's next to us, I mean, it's as far as from here to you.
So the thought, as part of the thought process too, was the creation of the C1 zone, is you have a softer transition. Like, do you really want to go R1 to heavy industrial?
No.
Or R1 to straight commercial? Or should there be some sort of softer transition? And in some places you can't do it, right? You just,
Right.
the land use doesn't work.
We'll go for a ride one day.
But, and I think that's the thought process that we're saying, is that we want these softer transitions. We don't want people to say, this is just the Wild West. I mean, you
Oh, yeah.
build anything next to me.
And the east side, you know, when you ride through there and you look at it, you can see, I guess because of urban renewal back in the 80s or whatever, that to me is a real transitional as far as an excellent mixed use. And then I worry about the old mill side, it being a C1, you know, how much traffic, how many stories, how many, you know, that kind of thing. But I do feel like I'm being heard, and I really appreciate you all for that. Now, if I could just get a few speed bumps, I'd be happy. Just to throw that in. Thank you very much.
Did you still have a question about the scenario where you want to rebuild in a C1?
I was just wondering, would there be a restriction to redevelop a commercial building into a contemporary worship center?
So in the C1, because we're trying to control scale, and usually the church draws on congregations from outside the neighborhood. I mean, some people drive miles to go to that particular church. So the C1 neighborhood commercial district does not accommodate, as drafted, does not accommodate places of worship. The C2 does, professional institutional does, but not C1 because we're trying to control scale, you know, within the walkable neighborhood.
Charlie, did you have anything?
It's got out offshoot question on another piece of my property. I own a piece of property south of town. I think y'all got it zoned. This is proposed?
The one's proposed, yeah.
R1, where it comes, so Sydney's is R1, which is currently not in operational business.
What is it now?
With those far
Sydney's is
zoning.
R1 right now. I own the property north of it with 2 little houses and a lot of real estate left over,
Probably just
but
let.
not enough to put a duplex unless I get it rezoned.
What's all around it?
residential, with cemetery across the road.
Cemetery,
Yeah.
maybe the judicial center across the street.
Right.
Yeah, you're surrounded by R1 basically, other than the cemetery.
Yeah, we were surrounded by,
That's proposed on,
it's the same over here too. General commercial conditional. And R1. In the judicial center if that happens.
So you would try. You would
I just wondered
try. You would
how the
try.
cities operate. They were grandfathered in, I guess.
have no idea.
And it was basically a bar for 100 years.
Which piece of property is that?
Sid,
Right there's the,
Dixie Town,
One on the island.
one in the
Oh, yeah,
triangle,
okay.
down by Southie.
Sydney's.
Cities.
So you would want it similarly zoned to something that is contiguous to, and if a R1's not the best fit, does it abut C2, Bill?
I think it abuts.
It abuts R1 because it abuts nothing, it has no, it's on a triangle, so it's 19 and 19, or 19 and 19.
So then I see your point, but the thought was to not create islands of zoning.
I mean, you're always gonna have an island. How big an island you got?
One parcel islands.
Yeah, okay.
Right, because what happens is then the next door neighbor says,
So, I mean, here's my question, you think somebody's gonna buy Sydney's, tear it down and build a house there? I wouldn't want my house in that corner.
no,
And the reason I'm asking is because I own the property
right?
next to it. And not that I care what somebody does, that I might have some future use for my piece of property.
Right.
You know, if I wanted to build a duplex on the remainder of my property.
So the problem we had with spot zoning is somebody comes in with a really good idea,
Yeah.
and we spot zone that property in a district where everything around it's something different. Well, then the next person comes in and says, well, I'm contiguous to them. Why can't I have the same zoning? So now I've got two parcels. And then a neighbor across the street says, well, you zone them that way. And then since 1965, that's happened hundreds of times, and now you have all
But
these.
the other argument is you're on the, basically I-75 with Thomaston.
True. So the better question is, does that R1 designation need to change?
Yeah, because what if somebody came there and said, I'm gonna rehab this building and put me a florist shop or just some small business there?
But the beauty of leaving it R1 is you still control the land use, because now they gotta come rezone their property. Instead of giving them carte blanche authority for a different zoning, you gotta come convince us what you're gonna build there is consistent with surrounding land use.
That's why a lot of jurisdictions have an agricultural district, because they know the applicant will have to rezone, because they're not going to use it as agriculture. You have control to that extent, just like you just said.
Say that again, Bill?
A lot of jurisdictions, they'll rezone, or they'll zone something, they'll leave it zoned agriculture, even though it's an old city that's growing, they grow into the agricultural district. But the county, for the most part, leaves it as agriculture zoned until someone comes in, and then they have absolute control over whether that zoning is granted or not, or what conditions are assigned to that zone, rezone.
All right, is there anything else? Any other comments? Russell, anything?
No, if you have any proposed changes, we'll still be talking with Charlie over the provision that we've done. You have a new draft, but there's not track changes in here, correct, Bill? Do we have a way to make that happen?
I got a text from my formatter today. I guess you could do it, but there'd be a lot of changes, little incidental changes. But an alternative is that I have the files that account for the discussion we've had, like for dry cleaning plants. Those files could be sent out as the major changes. We've done at least a half a dozen changes just in the last 30 days. That you and I have discussed, and then I've fashioned some sort of language to improve what we had. But I can check you back with you when I have
So y'all
a one-on-one
possibly upload
conversation.
that to the website that we can access?
Yeah, and that was the thought of pushing the date. We want to have at least one public hearing where everything's as final can be with the map and the ordinance. And that way, it's not changed in between public hearing and vote.
What's new in the ordinance is that we've combined this zoning ordinance and the sign ordinance. They're in just like it was, or it exists now. So that's what she's been spending most of her time on, because that involved quite a bit of reformatting, because we had two separate numbering systems.
Okay. If nothing else, do we have? Yeah, okay. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So ordered.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we call for the vote to do that?
Councilmember Greathouse? Councilmember Tucker?
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves?
Yes.
Councilmember Hitt?
Yes. So now do I have to have a motion to adjourn? So we have a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we call for the vote?
Councilmember Greathouse?
Aye.
Councilmember Tucker?
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves?
Yes.
Councilmember Hitt?
Yes. Thank y'all for coming.
Yeah.
Good work.
Call her on the way back to the room and ask about that. You have this text thing in.
I just text you that
My
information
email?
on the Fire Museum.
About restricted deed.
Yeah.
I didn't have a telephone number for Jeff.
I
don't know.
If you're the one that places the
He
restriction.
can't hear well, so
I want to check what city of Norcross, because it's a park there was privately owned.
That's his care.
Somehow, they
Oh, yeah, I got